Hello. Thank you for joining me for this conversation today. Grief. I often think about grief as the place that we are dropped in when someone we love has died. And so today I'm joined by some amazing people who I respect and appreciate so much. And we're going to have a conversation about the beginning of grief, what it might feel like, what you might experience, and what their experiences have been, and how we suggest some tips that might be helpful for you. And so, before we get started with this conversation, I'd love to introduce you to these two marvelous women. The first is Dawn Anderson. Dawn is an author who blogs regularly, and I absolutely encourage you to seek out her information because it's brilliant. She's also a graduate of my Master Grief Coach certification. Welcome, Dawn.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. And I am so happy to be able to share, some of my experiences in a way other than just the written word. And so Dawn Anderson is my legal name. It's what I was born with. But I couldn't get a website with that name. So I had to create a different pen name. So my pen name is Dawn Lauren Anderson.com. And if you go there, then you can actually sign up for my blog and read actually all my past ones. And I moved to Substack, but you can sign up there and get to those also. So
beautiful. And I will put all that information in the links below so that people don't have to worry about writing it down. They can find you.
Great.
I'd also like to welcome Kathy Tate-Hildreth. And I'm always afraid I'm pronouncing the last of it incorrectly. So please forgive me and correct me if I've got it wrong. Kathy is an accomplished, amazing woman who I'm so excited to introduce to you. And she's also a graduate of my Master Grief Coach certification. Hello, Kathy, and welcome.
Hello. Good morning. So I'm happy to be here. And I am newly a Master Grief Coach. So don't have a website yet, but I'm working on it. So and I'm happy to be here and share the experience that I had with grief, and so people can learn more than just reading it and wonder, and is this me? And what everybody's feeling with grief is different. So I'm happy to be here today.
I'm so glad you've joined us. And you've already both hit on some really good points. The beginning of grief. I'm imagining that most of us, because we're all over 21, we've all had more than one experience with grief. Maybe it was a pet dying, maybe it was a grandparent, a child, a neighbor, a dog. And I'm not minimizing any of these things. And of course, there are many, many other grief experiences, divorce, health, losing, anything. We're talking particularly about the grief that we experience when someone we care about dies. And I wonder, when you've had your most profound or perhaps your most recent grief experiences, and that's not necessarily the most profound, was the beginning what you expected, or might it have felt different?
I'm going to answer that first, if you don't mind, Kathy.
That's fine.
I've had 4 actual death experiences, grief experiences. And the first one was a suicide. That was my husband. And I don't think anyone ever expects suicide, no matter what. It's not something that you can predict. And so when it happened, I found him and I had to call 911. So I had the whole experience with the police and, that whole part, which ran the gamut of shock and laughter. There were some very funny things that happened during, those at least 2 hours. that I had all these people going into my garage and milling around, coming and talking to me while I was sitting out on the street in my car. So I was so shocked looking back on it that those kinds of things would happen. And I also didn't have, like, I didn't think I had any friends, you know, in the neighborhood, but somebody actually came and sat with me. And so, of course, she ended up becoming a really good friend. But yeah, so I think the laughter was surprising. And the police, of course, they're used to this kind of thing. So they, you know, I never felt judged about anything.
So
And
glad.
except for the other neighbors that were standing on the sidewalk and wouldn't cross the street. But anyway, yeah, but it was the laughter. I think that was the most surprising to me.
Isn't that interesting? And we're going to dive into that a little bit more in a few minutes too, because I find that very, very noteworthy. And how about you, Kathy? When you've experienced your most recent or most profound grief, and I'm wondering, was there anything that surprised you or that you didn't expect?
I took care of my parents, and when Dad passed away, you know, he passed away from cancer, and it was sort of expected. My mom, many years later, passed away. I was her caregiver, 24/7 for many years. And so when she passed away, I felt very alone. I felt that the medical part that I had set up, they weren't there. So I just felt lost, alone. Um, I did have her go to the hospital, and so she passed away in the hospital. And even the nurses and the doctors, they were like, they left me alone. And they gave me about 5 minutes with Mom after she passed, and they says, "Now you got to go." And of course, I was like 40 minutes away from home, and I sat in my mom's van because that's what I was driving, so it was easy for her to get in and out of. And I was like, I can't drive. I can't drive. And I sat for 45 minutes, and then I called my husband. He's like, I'm coming. And my brother came with him. So that way somebody drove his cars and my husband drove my mom's van. But I just remember feeling so lost. And even afterwards, I just felt so lost, like I didn't have anybody. You know, yeah, I had my husband, but that's I just felt like emptiness, you know,
Mhm.
and like it's hard to describe. It's just really empty. You know, I didn't know, you know, you have your routine taking care of somebody, and all of a sudden that's gone, and then you're like, now what do I do? Where do I go from here? So
I think that's a really vivid and clear explanation, and
yeah.
it makes a lot of sense. And I think about, I don't think these things are uncommon. You know, for me, the most profound grief was when our son Mike ended his own life. He died of suicide at the end of 2010. And I'd experienced an awful lot of losses in my life before then. But that particular experience, it was, how do we tell people?
Mhm.
Who do we tell? Do we make phone calls? Do we knock on doors? Do we wait and see who notices? And I thought it was very interesting. My neighbors had come outside later in the day. We'd known them for years. And this was after several phone calls, and people had been showing up. And I went over to tell them. And I'll never forget, but this is sort of burned in my brain. When I told them, she fell to her knees and began screaming, "No, this can't be real. It's not happening." And here was this very detached part of me as her husband was comforting her and trying to lift her. This part of my brain that still remembers all these years later, huh, that's a reasonable response. I wonder why I didn't act like that.
Yeah.
And so part of me all these years later says, there's no right or wrong response, is there?
Mm-mm.
I mean, we knew them, we cared about them, but it's not as though we were in each other's lives all day, every day. And I'm not minimizing the friendship because it's one I appreciate. But we might expect we will have this response, and maybe it's that.
Mhm.
And what if our response is different?
Mhm.
Think about those first hours, those first days. Dawn, you touched on something that we have in common, that there was some humor.
Mhm.
Does that still surprise you? And has that been part of other losses as well? And is that okay with you? Was it okay with others?
Well, okay, in some ways it doesn't surprise me at all. I think at the time when it happened, it was such a relief to be able to laugh instead of cry, because to me they're very close, and so 6 months after that occurrence, my father died, and I was there at his death. It was at home, and he died in my arms. Now that was way, way more upsetting to me, way more. And in that case, I had my mom there, and so I felt like I needed to be strong more for her. Uh, but in case, like, what do you do? Like that first day, well, that was late. Both times they weren't. Well, with my dad, it was early enough that I made phone calls. I always made the phone calls. And I realized since then, I'm a very strong person. So because of that, I don't, that's unusual. Okay, that's an unusual thing for someone to do, but it's what I've always done. And I've had four. So in the last 9 years. So, and they do get easier. I can say that. And of course, they were simpler deaths, but yeah, it does get easier. And I'm trying to, I know I called like his family. That was the other thing, like for my husband, it was, second marriage. And it was like, we'd been married for 14 years, but to me, it seemed like a short time. And yeah, it was really, really strange with his family. But one of the main things I can say is if you can find a point person, you call that point person. And if you can get someone to help you do it or do it for you, wonderful, wonderful. That to me is the best way by far. Someone who's not so emotionally involved. But I didn't have that opportunity. So I would, like my sister, okay, I call my sister and then, say, well, we'll let your kids know, because I certainly wasn't going to do that. I mean, that's an obvious one, I think. But when I was calling my, when I was calling my in-laws, I did the same kind of thing. I called the two people I felt were the most important, and then I let them decide who they were going to call. And that was suicide. So.
And that makes a lot of sense. And that might be different for other people, right? Maybe you feel the need to have a conversation with each person or not. Again, this is not right or wrong. It's just different experiences, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's really huge. There were certain people we did call that I called, certain people my husband called, but like my family, I called my brother, the poor man. I can't imagine he came home and probably had 17 messages on his phone just saying, call me. And now I think about it and think, wow, one would have been enough. He would have called. And I just felt the need to keep dialing. And when he did call me, I asked him to please go visit my parents, my other siblings. And when I think about it now, I feel deep gratitude and appreciation. And I also realize, wow, I put a lot of responsibility on him. I find myself wanting to say burden, and he never complained. And how I appreciate that. We do the best we can, and we don't necessarily know. How about you, Kathy? What did you find in this early part? Was there something that surprised you, something that supported you? What felt okay for you?
I know when I did the phone calls, because I was like, I need to tell people, everybody says, let me know if something happens to mom, and I was like, okay. So I called my sister, I called my two brothers, and then I called my children, and I was like, then I was like, oh, I have to call um my aunts and uncles, my mom's brothers and sister. And I was like, I just couldn't, at that point, I just couldn't do it. I didn't have any more energy. And I says, well, I could call later. And I says, I know if I wait till later, it's never going to happen. So I text them, you know, and then I says, and for the rest, I says, I knew they would let my cousins know. I didn't even have to ask. I knew they would let them know. And so the rest, I just posted it on Facebook. And I says, that's all I can do. I couldn't do anymore. So, and then I had my husband call the minister when we were setting up funeral arrangements because I just couldn't do it. So, but I did plan her funeral and everything. So,
In the funeral, that's something
yeah,
else I'd like to talk about.
yeah.
I've learned afterwards, it amazes me that I had gotten to that point of my life and didn't know we had options. I was almost 50 when Mike died, just a few weeks before. And Mike died on December 17th. Much of my family was out of town and I knew they'd be driving. And so I felt this urgency to have this funeral before Christmas so that they could go back with their families. And I look at it now and think, well, wow, that's kind of nuts, isn't it? At the same time, my eldest son was coming up from Texas. My middle son was literally moving home. He was driving home to Wisconsin from California. So we couldn't tell him until he got there in person. He refused to have that on his plate while he was driving. But in my head, I'm making these plans thinking, well, we have to somehow complete this, if that makes sense, so that they can have Christmas. And I've since learned so many things about there's no urgency. It's okay to have a funeral days later, weeks later, months later. I didn't know that. And there's a piece of me that says, I don't know if I would have taken that advantage of that opportunity if I'd known. And with most deaths that I've experienced, I probably wouldn't have, but with Mike, with his death being very different, he was only 23. He died of suicide. I wonder if waiting might have made a difference in how some of us process things. Maybe not. Is there anything about these ceremonies that we hold that you didn't know or that you've learned since or that served you well and you're glad you did know?
I know when with mom, it was like 3 weeks after she passed because some people wanted to go and they couldn't because of their work schedules and whatnot. And me personally, I felt like I was in this void for that 3 weeks. Now, would I have been that way if I had waited, done it really quick? I'm not sure, but I just felt like I can't do anything until mom's buried.
So you were like on hold.
Yeah, yeah, like on a hold, like a void, like you just couldn't do anything in your life for that time. It was like you were frozen in time, I felt. So, but I knew I could wait. And my sister said that she wasn't going to come down. I still haven't figured that one out because she's out of state. But I was like, do you want me to wait? It was also during COVID too. So, and and I was like, do you want me to wait? Because she is being cremated, because that's what she wanted. I says, we could wait. We could wait 6 months. We could wait till after COVID's over. And she's like, no, just go ahead and do it. So it could be her way of dealing with things too. But I'm sort of glad that she said no, because I probably would have been like frozen in time for even longer. Because I felt after the funeral, I was like, okay, now what's next? What's the next step? So
That seems to make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
We almost have a to-do list in our mind, don't we? It's what we expect. How about Dawn? How about you, Dawn?
So with my suicide husband, we were in a different state. We were in Colorado, and we both had been in Florida, and that's where all his family was. And his sister was a very kind of an aggressive woman. And I think when I told her, I think we discussed then that she would take care of it all. And I was so relieved. He did this about a month before his birthday. And so that was when the memorial service was, and he was Catholic. And I mean, I knew all about Catholicism and suicide and how they didn't go together very well. This was in 2014. And he'd gone to a Jesuit high school, so that's where it was done. And it was, to me, it was a beautiful service, and the father handled it very well. I mean, to me, it was perfect to have someone else deal with all this. I didn't have to do anything. I don't think I even had to give her a picture, because they had gone fishing together, and that was one of his great things that he loved. And that was the picture that was on the, the little pamphlet. So, and all the other ones were well, that's not true. The shortest one I had was with a husband who died of cancer. But I knew that my mother was ill and that she wouldn't last very long. And at that time, I was where I had grown up in Florida. And oh no, I wasn't, but that's where we were going to do everything. So I go to the church that I was confirmed in, that my mother and I went to, and they were so helpful. Oh my gosh, they were like, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe how kind they were. And I told them, I said, okay, so this is a trial run for my mother, because that's coming up next. I remember I told them that. And I mean, part of that was, we laughed about it. I'm a very joyful type person, or a laughing kind of person. So if I can put laughter into something, I feel so much more comfortable. And so I said, okay, so whatever we're going to do the exact same thing for my mom. So, let's consider all of that. And that's what we did. And it was very comforting, both of those. So.
And that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Yeah, there was definitely laughter in our house. People ugly crying. And I remember brewing pot after pot after pot of coffee as we're telling what I call Mikeyisms, the stories about things that would happen. And again, it's not a right or wrong, is it? It's what is the experience for you? And I think about some of the things that we would do. I remember sitting with my husband on the couch after everybody had left and saying, I don't know the right thing to do next. I could use a road map, a plan. Give me 1, 2, or 3. Like Kathy said, well, this is the next step. And that can be really helpful. So one of the things I think about, and I would love to have input from you, when I'm talking to grievers, especially new grievers, I like to remind them to eat nutritionally if you can, but something in your mouth, and probably supplements, because we're not always doing what we should. I like to remind them to drink. We get really dehydrated when we're grieving, and to sleep. And sleep can be, I thought it just sort of left my life for quite some time. And if you can't sleep, maybe nap or at least rest. And what I have found helpful, and I really want input from the two of you, is if someone said, don't forget to eat, I just didn't eat. And here's the funny part. 5 days, I didn't lose a pound. Didn't put a bite of food in my mouth. Didn't lose a pound. I drank gallons of coffee. But what I found after those 5 days was, if someone would put something in front of me and give me a fork and say, take a bite, that I could do. I remember someone at the funeral saying, would you like some water? And I had a choice. And so I said, no. Somebody else, God bless her, came and put a bottle in my hand, opened it up and said, take a drink. I could follow direction. When someone would say, let's sit down for a while, it helped me rather than giving me a choice. A choice felt like too much work. So I'm kind of curious, are these any experiences the two of you had? Because these things only happened with this grief experience for me, not with the many others I'd had. And I would imagine part of it was because it was my son and there was so much shock involved, but I don't know that. So I would be very curious. How about the two of you? Did you have any particular specific experiences that you might not have expected, and what was helpful?
Go ahead, Kathy.
All I can remember was me waking up in the morning going, oh, another day without mom, and I was like, and then my dogs would sleep with me. And I would like, okay, I need to get up. I need to feed the animals. I need to walk the dogs. And I would get up and I would do that. I'd get up and go to the bathroom. And I'd go walk the dog. I wouldn't even brush my hair, wouldn't even brush my teeth. I would like just go take care of my animals, walk the dogs, come back in, get them, everybody fed, settled down. And I'd go get me my breakfast. And then I'd go back to bed. And I would stay in bed all day. I was like, I'd turn the TV on and I'd fall back to sleep. I couldn't even tell you what I was watching. It was just the noise. And I was like, okay, I need to get over this hump. So I'd try reading. And I was like, didn't even know what I was reading. It was just words on a page. It wasn't sinking in what it was. And then I was like, I got into grief groups, checked them out. They helped a little bit, but it was like something I felt like I just had to do. There wasn't that connection. That wasn't really helping. It was just something to do. And then I was like, back to bed. Then I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. I'm a to-do list person. So I made it simple. Forget whatever I needed to do that needed to be done, like doing dishes, cleaning the house. I would be like, okay, get up, take care of the animals, eat breakfast, brush your teeth, brush your hair, and I'd be crossing it off. And then I found that I was out of the bed more. I was like, little baby steps. So, and then I would add another little thing to my list, wash the dishes, do the laundry. So
But
it
I
was
really
just
appreciate
little
that you
stepping
kept it
stones.
to, I appreciate that you kept it to the things that felt the most necessary, because we might like the house clean, but the world won't end if it's not. We're not going to be unhealthy if there's dust on the frames.
Mhm.
I think that was really smart.
It's interesting when I'm listening to you and I compare it to my own, actually very poor way of dealing with grief, because I did everything I could to ignore it, to not feel it. And so, oh man, I was an expert at that. But I also, and I was doing like just journaling at the time. I didn't really become a writer until went to my first writing experience, good 9 months later. So, but I knew I needed to write down everything that happened. And I mean, I wrote detail like you wouldn't believe. And then I also felt like I needed to have everything that was available to me. And at the time I was working in a police department. So I knew I could get the 911 call. I ordered the 911 call. I still have it. And because I wanted to, it's like I had to document absolutely everything. And, but it was, and I also, one of the first things I did was I had therapy, and I called my therapist immediately. And she's actually saw me this would happen on Friday, and I saw her on Monday. And she told me, well, you're doing really well. I think you're okay. And I'm like, of course, now looking back on it, if I was okay, then I wasn't okay. That's not the normal reaction. That's not the one one needs to have. One needs to be like Kathy. Okay. That, if I had done that, my life would have been a whole lot better and a lot easier. So I felt like I did everything I had to do in a week. I went back to work in 1 week later. And once again, I'm just like, it's like in some ways like it didn't happen. The only thing I had to worry about was getting to, the funeral in a month. And so each one of us can deal with it differently. I didn't have anyone. I had no one there. My son did come, thank God, and helped me do a number of things that I look back on, and I realized even at the time I was asking way too much of him. But he essentially spent the weekend with me. He was a scientist, and that's what he did for me. And he did it again later when my mother died. So it was like he helped me a lot in that. And also, and as far as the eating and whatnot, well, I had to cook for my son, right? And I will tell you, I did lose weight in that month after my husband took his own life. I wasn't trying to lose weight. And I don't know. And the other thing I did was I was angry. I was very angry at him. So immediately got garbage bags and took all his stuff and put it in garbage bags and cleaned up the house, because he had been someone who was messy and I was not that way. And so I know I did that during that week. Those were the most important things to me, were to now make this house mine and to get everything about him out of it. And because I was so angry. But
And we're talking about that really short timeline, aren't we? We're talking about those hours, those days, maybe those first few weeks that we're always going to have our own experience. It's very unique. For me, it was very helpful to be taking care of my son, my surviving sons, my husband, my daughter-in-law. And I know for you, you said it would have been more helpful to feel, have cried, have more experiences. For me, I don't think it was grief delayed anyway, because I was a snotty, teary mess, but it reinforced that purpose. And so I find it interesting and really helpful to know there's not one right way. There are so many different ways. But you also said something that I think is really, really important. I always, always, always encourage people to contact their medical practitioner, whether they see a doctor, a physician's assistant, nurse practitioner, if they're working with any sort of counselor or therapist. Let them know, because our body is going through so much and our mind is going through so much, that these things can really affect medications, and they can affect the way our body behaves, even if we think we're doing all the right things. So it's important to have our team, so to speak, put together, if at all possible. And those are things we may not always be able to remember ourselves or be aware of. And it could feel like, really, that's too much. That's about me, and I'm busy focusing on my broken heart. So that can be something else, as you've both talked about, saying, maybe somebody else can make this appointment, or maybe somebody else can remind me or take me along with them. If you were talking to someone today who has, and you are talking to people today. So if you're talking to someone who's very new in this grief, whether it's today, it was last week, or very, very recent, are there any tips or suggestions that you could give them that worked well for you, understanding that these are suggestions, these are not you got us, these are not you have to do this, but perhaps this might be helpful?
I think the first thing I would say is, who is your community? Who is your spiritual community? First of all, who's your community? Because, or do you have family? I didn't have family anytime. And so I was like, I needed to find substitutes for that. And some of the time I was in the church and other times I was not, but I did always have some kind of spiritual community, people who I felt were there for me in that way. And that to me was huge. So do you have that kind of person? Do you have someone to talk to? Do you, and I would say, well, you know, you can call me anytime, and then I'd make a note and call them, because they're not going to call you. It's unlikely that's going to happen. And then the other thing would be, you know, there's almost nothing you have to do immediately. Almost nothing, except for, you know, if they have a job, you need to tell people, you know, that they go to work with. Someone has to tell them. They need to know. But so much of the stuff is automatic and you really don't have to do a lot. And, you know, I have a lot of suggestions for people long before, but at the time, mostly it's that just take the time that you need, because you are important.
Oh, that's good. How about you, Kathy? What comes to mind for you?
I know the people that I have talked to about when they've lost somebody, you know, I says, do you have family? Do you have somebody there to support you so that you're not alone? And I've been lucky they've had family around to help them out and make sure they're not alone. And I always tell them, I says, doesn't matter what time of day, you can call me. So, and they have called within reasonable hours. They're not calling late at night. There's one gentleman, he just lost his wife, you know, and I'll be out late at night and I'll just drive by his house and just to make sure he's okay. I don't stop, just drive by, you know, not stalking him or anything, but he's a really good friend. And but he calls us every now and then, says, hey, how are you doing? It just makes small conversation. He doesn't really talk about a lot of the grief that he's going through, but you know, sometimes he says it's hard and he does talk, but he just wants somebody to talk to. And that's important, just to know somebody's there to talk to. So, and especially during the holidays, you know, we would call and check on him. He'd call and check on us and say, hi, how are you doing? So, because that first year's, it's hard.
That
Yeah.
connection, right?
That connection, right.
He matters. People care about him.
Yes. Yes, that's important. So
I think you've both given excellent ideas. You know, I always tell people just to breathe. Can we focus on the breath? And I'll ask them to close their eyes and breathe in. It's really slow. And then just to let it out. Because we become so frantic, as you've both expressed. There's so many things that we feel we need to do at the same time. It feels out of control and overwhelming and not enough and too much all at once. And if we can make some time just to breathe and know that's really our only responsibility, your heart will beat itself and the breathing will happen. But if you can focus on that, it brings a little bit of calm. I'm not going to say it makes everything easy. It makes it a little calmer.
And I found too with me, I would put Post-its up. You're great. You're awesome. You're doing fine. You know, just positive notes, you know, put it on the bathroom mirror, you know, where you go and see that mirror every morning. So, you know,
the other thing that we did, because we're very different personalities when I think about my husband, my two sons, my daughter-in-law. So that's 5 of us, right? 5 very different personalities. Mikey, my youngest son, everybody adored. We all had different thoughts and feelings. So we made this agreement. I mean, my children obviously didn't live with us anymore. So we made this agreement that we will not make any decisions without the others. There'll always be a calm conversation when we sat down to make the funeral plans, when we talked about the headstone, when we talked about the funeral, when we talked about anything. It was all 5 of us. And it's kind of funny because there's almost this image in my head from a really bad sitcom of this little huddle moving around every place. And that's sort of the way we operated. for a long time regarding this, because we needed to be mindful that we have different feelings and different thoughts, and that this one might tick me off. There's no doubt I ticked others off, but how can we express that in a way that's clear and say back off, but still say I love you and I get why you're doing it? Give me a little bit of space too. Both of you talked about making sure you're not alone. I desperately needed the time alone. My husband went back to work the day after my son's funeral. I desperately needed some time alone. And so did my middle son. So it's really not a wrong or right, is it? It's what's right. And it's not even what's right for you all the time, but what's right for you right now.
Yeah.
Maybe this morning you need time alone. Maybe this afternoon you need to have a crowd or something different.
Yeah. I think it's being open to it's being connected to your feelings. And so I love the idea of talking someone through breathing. I love that. That is a wonderful tip, especially when you're checking up on people, if they're open to it. Now, some people, they would just be like, it would turn them off so much that it wouldn't be good. But for the most part, most people could be, are fine with that. And yeah, so I think the breathing part is really important. And also, I think doing things for others, sometimes you don't need their permission. You don't need their permission to care about them and to just stop by with something. I just it depends, but once again, that depends upon the person. Some people, they would just be abhorred if someone stopped by. And like for me, I'd be like, oh, come on by, I'm fine, my neighbor who came and sat with me, it took a lot of courage for her to do that, to come over and say hello to me, because we've got police cars and all kinds of activity, and it was just really, that was something. And then she continued. We did things together. We didn't even really know each other, and we were right across the street from each other. We really didn't know each other, and but we learned those things that we enjoyed. We did an art class together, and so I think if you are open to receiving help, and I think that is really important, whether it is spiritual help or just simply just have that feeling that you are open to help, is fabulous. And I think that comes from some meditation and some time, also time.
Well put. So as we get ready to wrap this up, are there any thoughts, any final thoughts that either of you have that you'd like to offer someone who's in this very precious place of grief?
There's one thing that I think you brought up also. Some of us are very much caregivers. We're just caregivers, as you are too, Kathy. And I think it gives us a lot of comfort when we can take care of other people. And so I think that's something that really helped me also. Whether I was baking something and took it to my friend or took it to work. I'm sure I made a lot of stuff that I took to work, after that time. And those are, so finding ways to emphasize who you are, what brought you joy before this thing happened, to think about that and journal about it, and find ways to do that same thing now. I think that's important.
That's really good. How about you, Kathy? Any final thoughts?
I like what Dawn said. She touched on a lot of positive things, and I was thinking too, having that support there, that you need. And yeah, you do need quiet time. You need to go through the process. And it's, find new hobbies. I know one of the things I found was like some of the old stuff that I used to do. I was like, I don't want to do that anymore, but I need something new. Find even doodling. If you're not an artsy person, do doodling. Draw lines on a piece of paper with different colored pencils. And make circles and everything. Just do a little baking. I mean, putting a smile on somebody else's face makes you just feel so good. I do baking, and I baked cookies for some people, and just handing it to them and say, hey, I'm thinking of you. Thank you for, coming in, or just drop them off, and just seeing them smile, that's made me feel so good. I did try journaling, and to me, I found it very intimidating. So I'm a list person. So I would list what I was feeling, and then it got to the point at the end of the evening before bed, I'd bring my book out and I would like, okay, what positive things happened? What did I feel good today about? And then I'd close it and go to bed. So, and the breathing, I mean, some of the meditation, listening to calm music before bedtime, it's beautiful. It helps you relax so you can sleep better. So, but yeah, and just know you're not alone through your grief process.
You're so right, because if anyone's listening to this in any format at all, they're not alone. They're connected to all of us. And I guess if I were to suggest anything to anybody, I keep thinking about those very first hours and days. It would be that it's okay. You're going to be okay. You're not alone. What do you absolutely need to do today? You need to eat. You need to drink. You need to breathe. Let's take care of that first. And it's okay to delegate. It's okay to say the dog really needs a walk. Frank, can you do that? And we'll talk about that in some of our other recordings about how to delegate and how to help and how supporters can help. But to be as much as possible, and it can be really hard to say, will you do this for me? But one of the things I like to talk to people about, and I know both of you do as well, is when someone says, just let me know if there's anything I can help. I like to give people sort of a list of things that they can ask them. So we're going to talk about those things in other recordings as well. But you two have been incredibly helpful and supportive today. And I think you've given great ideas and suggestions and experiences to let people know none of these things are bizarre, unusual. There's 3 of us here, and we've had very different responses to the grief experience. And that's normal too. So I want to thank you both. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Kathy, for joining me. And I look forward to having many more of these amazing conversations. And so I wish everybody a gentle day of peace and healing. Namaste.
Namaste.